So this is probably the only time where I start out the story as the book intends. Episode 9, The Homecoming Parade, I think the episode is called Homecoming, if I remember correctly, is bittersweet because it marks the halfway point of season 2. And there's some really important things that happen in this episode, both for the lore and for the team in the world I've constructed. Um, in case you're not watching this back to back, the idea now is that the fog, the living smoke that Zedd created in the first war against Zordon and Eltar, and has now refined in a second bid to take over the Earth, um, has gotten unbearably bad. I use the frog in the boiling pot analogy, and in some ways that comes to fruition here. Now, it's supposed to be a good time. The backdrop of this is that I've informed the Rangers that there is a homecoming parade that they've kind of been working towards a little bit. Jane has been doing a float because she was asked by the person that leads the student council to work on a float. Eddy is going to be driving one of the floats. Brick is supposed to be in the float parade, um, but is not in the float parade where he should be because he has chosen both to be Ranger and to be with Jane, which sort of bucks tradition enough. And his kind of newfound passion leading not completely away from baseball, but a little bit away from baseball, where he's starting to find other interests and other things to take up his time, has left the athletic department feeling a little cool on Brick Kerrigan. So he's walking beside the sports float, essentially, and Cecily is in the stands with the Magicals. Um, but before that happens, that's just the background of it. The homecoming parade has been happening since 1972. The Miss Winter Court, who's the winner of the homecoming parade, gets to choose the theme for the winter dance kind of thing. It's a really traditional holiday event for high school. Much like prom is supposed to be kind of the pinnacle of things, and Sabrina misses it. Unfortunately, the Rangers have other things to do. So homecoming will never quite be what they think it is, but episode 9 starts out with an introduction for homecoming, and then probably the most traditional and only time I followed the book, which is to say, at the point now, the Rangers are level 7, level 8. So they've gotten a couple of general perks. Um, they have a real sense of who their character is. And so now, with intention, all of the Rangers are trying to upgrade armor. None of them really try to upgrade any of the Sentinel weapons that much. Maybe they're still feeling a little frosty from having lost their original power weapons. But there's definitely a lot to be done for the armor. The way that I scale it up is they have to go increments by 5 every time. It starts out at 10 since that's the classic difficulty. So if you want a heavy armor or a silent armor, because you can choose either of the branching paths, it doesn't seem to me that any ranger can't choose either path. Um, and this has been done a little differently. Like in the Forever Pink book, they've added in the glittering ninja armor, which is a different kind of thing. But in the core rule book, you can either choose silent or you can choose heavy armor. I've had rangers do both to great effect. But you have to hit a 20 in the difficulty for it. And I always have them roll a skill that will give them the best chance of that. But the way that they kind of test out their new armor or their weaponry or something is that there's supposedly in this book this place where you can do like a training ground, like a holodeck somewhere in the command center. Um, we haven't really used it before because we haven't had much use for it, but this is kind of the first episode where the Rangers themselves do it with intention. Because now they've got all 5 of the marbles, as it were, and they want to see what they all do. My favorite thing about this episode at the very front is that the green marble which is, where is it? It's over here. The green marble over here actually has two settings. When Eddy has used it, there is the sincerity of your faith or the strength of your call. And you get that question in your head and you answer it, and that kind of informs what happens. And the entire time, Eddy has been choosing um, the sincerity of the call. And the sincerity of the call is the two double axes that are kind of bound together, and they have a sound-based wave attack, um, which he's tried really hard to break. But so strength of your call is actually something that bulks up your morphin suit. It adds to your might, essentially. And so Brick and Eddy actually get to see what that looks like. Is that Brick, along with having his scarab shield, which obscures actually um, the suit of the elephant a little bit from view. He just gets the pinstripe and the helmet change a little bit. He shows off these muscles and gets to work against the Mongo Putty for a little bit. They work a little bit with the snow to figure out that the white marble that was given to them um, by Dr. Whitaker Scott actually is about as much about terrain as it is about, offensively using it as a snowy tiger themed weapon, um, which may come in handy today. So all the Rangers have that going on, along with the backdrop of now the term paper trilogy is done, the term paper's done. Now it's homecoming time. I have fudged a little bit of the time stream, of course, but that's my prerogative, as long as it sort of makes sense. Um, Yeah. So homecoming is fun. I always love this. I go with for the Bob's Burger sentiment a little bit when I choose like food carts and things. And of course, homecoming is an excuse because it's Angel Grove and Angel Grove High is well known to do a thing with like food carts. So you've got something like the Poison Parsnip. We got the place that did the burritos from the Lego episode that I can't remember the name of to save my life. Um, but everything is going pretty well. Uh, a couple people that are allies of the Rangers are there as well. They'll become important. Mr. Kruger, who is helping to kind of chaperone and keep things moving on. Mrs. Appleby, who's in the stands with any kind of visiting diplomats or anything like that, if any such thing happens like that. Latour is just in the stands because it's sort of a fun, jubilant event, and he really needs that. Things have not been going well for Latour because he's not tied to the ley lines of the city, but the ley lines of the city are very important to him, and that sort of spiritual direction of my life sense, and having them kind of going awry has been very hard. Um, yeah, and things started out okay. It's a homecoming parade. It's like a mile-long route you travel along at a snail's pace. Everyone cheers, some people throw candy. This is the first time Brick is actually being confronted with the choices that he's made and how they kind of affect things that happen to him in school, which we didn't really get to dive into very much, which was a little bit of a shame. But it was sort of like a, hey, this is starting to actually affect your social status that you came in with. So this is something to be aware of in the future. Cecily is comforting the Madrigals. The Angel Grove High Madrigals are this really cool choral team that has a very Cecily vibe. They do a lot of like Yule chants and stuff like that. And everything starts out really well, really normal, which of course, as you know, in my universe is not well and normal at all. Um, Not even Brick is the first to notice the way the sky changes. Now, if you've listened into Power Rangers Centurion, you know the sky change normally portends something bad. In the case of Centurion, it's Ivan Ooze. In the case of here, when the sky goes dark, and the only one that can really see it is Brick just because of how they're looking, um, there's red lightning that shoots down out of the sky, and there's pealing laughter as if thunder. And that red lightning actually brings a couple of the floats to life. One where the Angel Grove angels are sitting on, which is in a response to all the now missing people and kind of the city starting to lose control. These Angel Grove angels, are a representation and a reminder in that sort of leftovers way, not a cult, but in the leftovers way. Um, and one float that comes to life has like a trident theme. So there's an arm with like a trident, it's like trident wielding character on it. And of course, the Angel Grove mascot being a cat means that this cat is coming to life, this giant gruesome thing. Unfortunately, Eddy is driving one of the floats that comes to life, so he sort of loses control of the vehicle. Now, he can't really see, so he doesn't know why he's lost control of the vehicle. And Brick tries to come up alongside to help him open the door because he gets trapped. The door's kind of shut down. So he is now effectively trapped in a car. Brick tries to come up alongside. Brick gets scooped up by the trident. So now Brick gets hoisted into the air, which is not great for a couple of reasons that will become delightful. Um, what does happen is Mr. Kruger is able to get to Eddy and get him out of the car. And this is the first time, because remember that Brick has actually seen Mr. Kruger up close exhibiting some Green Ranger potential. The lightning on his forearms when he tries to punch Goldar during the 4-H episode way back at the beginning of the season. Obviously, he had the green marble on his rosary that he gave to Eddy. But this is the first time Eddy has actually seen um, Mr. Kruger do anything of this nature. He's able to kind of funnel whatever power he has from the Morphin Grid and wrench open Eddy's door and get Eddy out. And this is the first instance. So this first instance, because there is still red lightning falling, there's no putties. So really, except for the floats themselves, the only danger is from the red lightning. Um, so Eddy is able to get out of the vehicle, and he and Mr. Kruger have a very quick exchange where Mr. Kruger is like, "Hey, go do what you need to do." But in the back of Eddy's mind, there is, of course, the person that gave him the green marble is now exhibiting marble-like symptoms. So is he a ranger? Question mark. Is he meant actually to build this thing that I have? Um, it came out because I asked them because they had to choose as they transformed, what marble are they using? This is one of the few times that we really actually see people um, choose different marbles. Jane sticks with the yellow one because lightning on lightning. She also makes the mistake after transforming of calling out to Brick in helmet form, in Ranger form, and so unfortunately, near to Jade as the Ranger was the school newspaper gossip, and so she now thinks that Brick is cheating on Jade with the Red Ranger, and that's going to be the hot gossip at the school for a little while. They'll be too busy to do anything about it, but that is something to consider has happened. Um, Unfortunately, Brick is kind of the most in danger because he can't transform and very much wants to. Um, it's at this point, I think Jane has to either move to switch. Okay, so no, I'm incorrect. So Jane actually, because this has to happen. What happens is, and my notes are a little unclear about this because everything was happening very quickly. Is that they use the the snowy tiger orb to actually change the terrain, which I really loved. They did this to give a way for Brick to kind of slide down the trident. Um, and then I think Jane, because Jane does transition to the golden orb, Jane basically fights lightning with lightning. Jane takes up this really great defensive stance to keep everyone safe. And in doing so, does not notice, but Brick does notice from his high vantage point before he's brought down that Mrs. Appleby, while trying to save students and keep them safe, is almost hit with lightning, but she is shielded by gold. And Latour from the stands is seen by Cecily, and he's shielded by blue. And so all these people that they know that they're allies are getting shielded by things. What's interesting is this battle doesn't actually take as long as other battles because the foes they're facing don't fully transform. They still stay as floats, and so they don't gain a lot of musculature. They don't fully transform into monsters. They're still half cars. And so as the Rangers kind of succeed in the battle, the thing that they sort of notice is that there is someone else in their helmets on the Ranger comms. It's a voice that they don't really recognize because it has been modulated on purpose. Even that is apparent. And it's a voice that's taunting them about Alpha. They can't seem to contact the center, the command center. And the Rangers really come to the realization that they were always going to win this battle easily because this was not the real battle. This was a smokescreen. Um, this is the introduction of the Dark Ranger. They are the Rangers in their helmet are teased by this voice modulated figure about Alpha, about things in the past, about Quentin even. And it becomes kind of this very anger-inducing thing, or would, except they're so in their heads about it, that it's all adrenaline. And they go to the command center, or they try to go to the command center, but they can't get into the command center. When they get to the command center, there is this kind of tornado of dark maroon red lightning tornado energy around the command center itself. They're basically bounced back from the teleportation, and now they're standing outside looking at this wall. Um, this is where, as a GM, I had to help them figure this out because I had created this, and the reality of it was not obvious. They started talking about going back to find the other people because the people that had been at the parade that had showcased this energy, Mr. Kruger, Mrs. Appleby, the tour, maybe they need to even go find Amy, the Dr. Whitaker Scott. Um, and that really wasn't what it was. I did not want a 14-hour episode where they were trying to chase down people because that's not the point of this. I had to give them the point. So this is where, as a GM, I didn't do as good a job because I didn't have the words for this. Basically, the sentiment is that the darkness of the living smoke is all about that you have embraced your fear and your anger, and you're being essentially eaten by this fear and this anger and all the darkness and the shadow version of yourself. Like it teaches you to embrace the things that not even that you don't like about yourself, but about the darker parts of yourself. The like, I would say a Red Ranger, they have great confidence, but maybe their ambition blinds them. The living smoke might take that seriously and actually literally blind you for a time while you're being overly ambitious. It's not to say those traits can't be useful, but it's to say that to embrace Zedd's version of them is to give away part of yourself, in a manner of speaking. And so what they have to do is instead of attacking, they have to walk through the tornado and trust in the Sentinels and trust in who they are and what they bring to Rangerdom, for good or for ill. It's about trust, it's about faith, it's about peace, essentially. And I have to do that in kind of a speech because I had no idea how to get them there without flat out telling them. Um, but but because we built up such rapport, even through me creating a lot of heartache in season two, that they do walk through. Uh, because the other option is, spending hours going to get people, and they don't have hours. That modulated voice in their helmets is still teasing them. Um, and they come in to the space. And for those of you that haven't, visualize the command center. In my version of the command center, I kind of equate each ranger with their own part of a console or their own console. The way that it's laid out in the TV show is there's enough consoles where around the platform before the viewing globe where it would make sense to me that each ranger would have their own console or way of interacting with the spectrum. So I have five of those in there. There is one for Quentin, but as long as Quentin's been gone since the first episode, his console has been gray. There's been no yellow. There's a little through line with Jane, where Jane has been unable to find any yellow. So what they see on top of Quentin's terminal, essentially sitting there, is the Dark Ranger. Now, Brick is the only one that is convinced of this. I think Eddie might agree, but no one else outright explicitly states they agree. That the Dark Ranger is probably Quentin. I'm not sure if that's John or if that's actually Brick. But either way, you can't actually see who it is. And they find out in the course of battling the Dark Ranger here at the command center while Alpha is essentially decommissioned and Zordon is missing from his tube. Um, the Dark Ranger attacks. The Dark Ranger has Quentin's coin, which is being used as a weapon to fling around the command center. When it is finally caught by Eddy, who catches it, it is burnt around the edges. And that burn is slowly encroaching around the middle, but it's not quite gone. And it's going to stay burnt around the edges. And to find out what happens to that, you need to listen to the Centurion podcast, um, because there's a version of that that exists in that is part of this whole much bigger universe. The Dark Ranger has their own suit. You can see it here. And this Dark Ranger is very mocking of them, has a lot of anger, it seems, but also some weird familiarity. Um, what they sort of realize horrifyingly, though, is that even though this is a Dark Ranger created by Zedd, it is not someone that can actually leave their chute. Cecily is actually the one that gets to a space where not to attack, but to try to help the person in the suit. Um, they notice they're welded in, that this is not a suit, because most Rangers have a helmet that can detach, so they can take it off, so they can retain some humanity when they need to, but still be, powerful and protected. Whoever is inside this suit, this Dark Ranger that has Quentin's coin, um, which I don't think I ever explicitly say it's Quentin, but it is Quentin. That's where this has all been leading in some ways. Um, Quentin does fire on them. Quentin says some cruel things. It does not sound like himself. It all comes through this modulated Darth Vader-esque voice. Um, and of course, the suit doesn't look right. There's like, in some lights, it looks kind of yellow, but it has some of this olive green and has a black tint to it. You can't see the eyes at all. Um, and this Dark Ranger basically is using Quentin's coin to try to destroy the tube that Zordon is in to try to take the Rangers down in the command center. And you can't get into the command center without a coin, in some fashion. What the Rangers tried to do, Brick's idea, I believe this was Brick's idea, was to try to emulate what they had done, um, to Madame Blackwelder, in Saint Honore. They tried to make a circle to try to get the Sentinels to help to basically de-transform this Ranger to save Quentin. And they don't succeed. He teleports away before the Sentinels can finish working their magic, because they do try. They try very hard for a good solid hour and a half of this combat to actually really talk to Quentin to try to figure out what has happened to him. Um, Eddy keeps this coin for as long as he can until something is going to happen that's going to take this coin away from Angel Grove. But Eddy captures the coin and holds on to it. And it does burn, it does hurt, but it's worth it because it's Quentin's coin, right? Um, it's a very demoralizing end of the episode in some ways. Because now the truth is that the person they knew, Quentin Turner, has potentially turned to the dark side, is potentially the Dark Ranger. And I leave them kind of sitting on that because they also have to get Alpha back up online, and Alpha has to help Zordon come back. So it's very much um, it's very much a heartbreaking episode. It's sort of the central piece of this is what happened to Quentin. Here's Quentin now, but this is not the Quentin you wished had been here. And not being able to feel like you can do enough. Um, and I knew personally they weren't going to win the combat for plot reasons. Um, but it was really nice having Quentin back for the episode, even as the evil version of himself. The player playing Quentin had a lot of fun doing voice modulations, and it was a genuine surprise that we all had. It was really cool. But this is what the Dark Ranger looks like. You can tell that I borrowed a little bit from some of the other shoots, but I've taken away the fantastical elements. I've made it more militaristic, which will become important later. But this is the Dark Ranger. And this is who, under Zedd's influence, Quentin Turner has become, at least for right now. The next episode is a little I'm not going to say less creepy because it's still creepy, but it's less heart-wrenching creepy. I guess it's heart-wrenching again for Brick because Brick seems to be getting the short end of the stick in season two. He's not getting a lot of information from Zordon. He's lost people like Merritt Lee, whose mother Andrea became Scorpina. He's had to do a lot with missing Quentin because he and Quentin were becoming very close friends. He's had to deal with the fallout from having Jane as a girlfriend who's not the popular cheerleader type, but is becoming even more artistic and is realizing that a world without even the pigment of yellow has become really problematic. And so we go on to episode 10, which is called Tangled Strings. And so I start out the episode saying everything is fine. And I also gift them everyone officially becomes level 8, so they get their um, second general perk, so they can really continue to individualize their characters. Um, there is a new student club that I introduce, and the student club is the Angels of Angel Grove, and their tagline is "What can the Power Rangers do?" Question mark. And it's the idea of the Power Rangers have been pretty helpless against this living smoke. They've sort of created this group, and it's student council endorsed as well. So Maribeth, who is the person that got Jane to do floats, that is sort of not an antagonist, but like that person in high school that has way too much time on their hands to make student council their whole thing, like Paris, except she doesn't have Rory to soften her. This is an episode that has a two-part thing in that they get a text message from Eddy that Eddy is going to do some recon at Quentin's house because he wants to do something proactive. And he's going to go off and do that on his own. And I have that as a very special episode, so I'll add that as a tagline for here for what is found. Eddy promises to only do recon, to only do like sneaking about, and to not be like offensive about it. Um, so Brick and Jane and Cecily all sort of text back and be like, "Hey, be safe, check in, et cetera, et cetera." Um, but there's sort of this background of now there's a memorial board going up in the cafeteria about the people that are missing because there's enough people in town missing that there are some like light poles that are all flyers about, hey, we're looking for this person. Um, it's this idea of that things have gone on so far and for so long that even the townsfolk are getting fed up with it. Like even the people that can kind of turn away from living in a city where monsters attack every other week or every week, that they're like, this is too far. So we're starting to see that. Um, and Brick gets under some psychological warfare. So um, Brick has had Cecily and Eddy have sort of had to deal with this where Cecily has still been seeing herself as Rita when she looks in mirrors, and it's to the point where she stopped looking at mirrors, and she's been actually seeing this a little by little since the halfway Halloween episode, but it's kept going, especially with the living smoke kind of all around her as she started to see it more and more. Eddy has been seeing, missing posters that were there 1 second and then gone the next, almost all for Quentin. It's Brick's turn now. There is a little hot dog snack shack near where they do practices for baseball, and Brick thinks he sees Quentin in the snack shack, and he goes to this closed snack shack, and he can smell hot dogs cooking, and he basically tries to force his way in. And there's nothing there. There's graffiti that is made by the Dark Ranger. That's like signed graffiti, but it was meant to taunt Brick. And Jane will also be taunted, but not in the same way. Cecily has been really busy, so she hasn't really had to look too much at her own reflection, which is more and more like Rita all the time. The reflection, not Cecily as a person necessarily. Maybe she'd agree or disagree. But so Cecily has been really busy. She's been making a lot of money designing dresses for homecoming because she has the capabilities and skill, and the kids, the women of Angel Grove are willing to pay her to help make really, really unique homecoming style dresses. She's been super busy anyways. So it's easy kind of not to think about it in some ways. And Jane and Cecily, because Cecily is using the art room um, sort of as a secondary work location, has permission to do that. Jane and Cecily have this sort of conversation where they all sort of realize that are being affected by the smoke, and Cecily talks a little bit about seeing herself as Rita is in her reflection and how that feels. And Jade has been having a tough time too. Not in as a concrete way as much, but still there's been a lot of heartbreak and not a lot of time to actually reflect on what has happened, not to reflect on, Luna leaving town even. So being down a ranger in a way that they can physically see, because there are five Sentinels, so there should be five rangers. And it's been really hard for Jane, as it has for all of them. But Jane and Cecily get to have a conversation about this. And it's not even just about reassurance, but about that even though they don't know the answers, they're here for each other. And that definitely something that separates Cecily from Rita is the idea that Rita does all this kind of in charge, but sort of on her own. And even just by virtue of Cecily choosing, not just to be a ranger, but choosing friendship and community, it's something much different from Rita. Um, and it's about that time that Jane sees, because they're doing a puppet unit in the art classes. It's just about that time that Jane sees a puppet head move of its own volition, very Puppet Master, and she will end up using Puppet Master gifts, of which there's only one, to Brick, for at the end of Brick's practice, a Brick will um, come and see what's going on. But Jane, this episode, is beset by moving puppets. Uh, if you're not a puppet fan, and there's like a mannequin clown um, doll horror thing, this is probably not the episode for you. Um, Also, it's a running through line that the baseball team likes going to Olive Garden after practices and games to get Olive Garden, and Brick's not really big on that anyways. Um, so Cecily and Jane, after this heartfelt conversation ends and Jane's has this interaction, Cecily does not have the interaction. She does not disbelieve Jane, but she herself cannot verify. So when Brick comes along and also can't verify it, they sort of have to take it on Jane's word, and Jane has to kind of get the information from the art teacher to find out where these puppets came from. And they came from a new place called Angel Grove Toy and Sweets. It's a nondescript name, and it's in a nondescript shop in a nondescript strip mall. Um, because it's earlier in the day when they leave, there's not a lot of business, so it's just kind of them. Uh, I really hit home here about this idea of how much loneliness the living smoke inflicts as well, because the streets are becoming less busy. People aren't really going places. People aren't really doing things as much. And so really here you can feel the creepiness factor, the kind of Twilight Zone loneliness of it all. Um, the toy and sweet shop is really the only thing in the strip mall. Everything else has a for rent sign or a coming soon sign. And it literally is just a shop full of marionettes and puppets, and also little barrels of penny candy that you unwrap in cellophane to really throw off things like theater performances. Um, Jane continues to be the only one to get these like smirks and head turns and Five Nights at Freddy's-ish type of things um, from from the dolls. Brick doesn't see it again, and neither does Cecily. It's just Jane, and Jane is not having a good time. Jane is like anywhere but here kind of thing, right? Because that's how I feel. There's a person called Odell who is at the counter. Almost immediately, you can tell he doesn't look right. He has sort of an Odo from Deep Space Nine sort of face. Something is just kind of wrong with his face. Um, he does blink, but it doesn't quite look right to Cecily, and so Brick sort of tries to have a conversation with Odell, and Odell's like, "No, we just got here. No, nothing wrong with the dolls or anything like that." Um, when Brick actually does go to like poke Odell's cheek, it feels very warm, but he doesn't really respond to the cheek poking as it was. And I make a pithy reference to, well, it's California and he's a minimum wage worker, so maybe he's just dead inside. Um, but what actually ends up happening is Brick goes behind the employees only counter after realizing that Odell can't follow him because Odell is not a full person. Odell is only basically uh, waist up to what you couldn't see behind the counter. And what Brick finds is that there is a little makeshift workroom and a little bedroom set up for Finster, who is working at the shop. Um, Finster just starts talking with Brick like it's the most normal thing in the world. When Brick tries to get answers, Finster's like, I'm just literally running a business. Please return to your shopping, humans. He calls them humans and is like, yes, that sounds pretty good, humans. Um, Cecily is kind of less uncomfortable with this only because Cecily got to talk with Squat and had heard a little bit about what had been happening with Rita on the moon and had passed that along. This is the first time they're actually getting to see Finster. I think this may actually be the first time that anyone outside of like the original five Rangers in the main universe have really gotten to see Finster at any kind of closeness. Yeah, but Finster's just like he's microwaving burrito. He has some clay. He's working on more sculptures and things like that. He says he's in a costume just so he doesn't have to deal with people knowing he's an alien. But eventually it comes out um, that he and Brick have an understanding that he knows he's not who he says he is. Like it's not a costume, it really is Finster, but there's also just stuff he's not saying. Eventually he confesses and he calls what he's going to tell them gossip. He confirms with the gossip that things Jane has been experiencing is not because of him. Like he's not doing evil maniacal things. He's just literally trying to work, but it's because of the living smoke of Zedd's. Finster and Squat, and in some cases Babu, if Babu has left the shadow spider dimension. It's called space fog to them. And Finster kind of complains that Rita just really doesn't want an artist anymore. He drops the lore that putties can no longer coalesce and actually be born through the monster maker, like the space fog that has hit the moon, essentially keeps putties from becoming putties. Like they can't fully stay together. And so there's no more putties. There's not as much use for him as an artist for Rita. Um, and so he left to work for employment on Earth. And Finster drops a pronoun drop. He says, well, he was better staying off dead. He was better off staying dead after the war. Um, and that he has influenced Rita. And so she just wants to attack. There's no art in what she wants to do anymore. Um, it takes a long time for Brick and Cecily and Jane to actually get Finster to say Zedd. Eventually he does, kind of confirming this whole thing, specifically from apparently a former henchman of Rita's, as it seems like Finster was devoted to her as far as he could create art for her in the form of these monsters, and he sees them as art. And now that's kind of ended, and now his cover is blown. But Finster really likes this work. He likes what he does. Um, he comments a little bit on Zordon as though they have a prior relationship and kind of comments on him kind of being stuck in the tube. There's something about Finster that feels very, in the course of this conversation, both sidesy. Like he could have easily at some point helped make a new version of an Alpha unit or even been something like Alpha himself to make the Zords even. Um, Through the course of the conversation, Finster hasn't been moving away, but Finster has been moving throughout like his shop, like doing things. He's been in the back doing things, going about this as though it's such a normal experience when in reality, the things they're learning are more horrifying than any of them really know. And through the conversation, Finster sorts to realize that maybe there's more to this, even himself. That maybe hiding isn't going to be enough. Maybe that's fine enough for Squad, but as an artist, Finster could do this, but, but, what happens is there is a attack on the shop. The living smoke inhabits a couple of things from the shop windows that actually leave the shop while they're having the conversation. And they're little tiny bunnies, and they have little tiny bunny carrot grenades, which you'd think would be really cute in a small soldier's way and couldn't hurt. But the living smoke has made these grenades actually quite impactful and dangerous. And so Cecily goes after them, Brick goes after them. Um, just as Ralph with Jane, Jane is going to go after them. Uh, but in the middle of this battle, in the middle of this like acrobatics, kicking of the uh, maniacal little bunny toys, Finster actually starts shouting at the living smoke. Um, uh, Brick also tries the axes since he's going to try using the green marble today. So he actually tries the axes to actually use them in their sonic form, and he has a bit more success with that because he thinks that's probably better against the toys. But in the midst of doing all this, in the midst of Cecily and Jane and Britt trying to be these heroes and Eddy doing his recon, Finster starts yelling at the living smoke. There's not much to embody, but there's enough where Finster can kind of face a direction and just starts yelling in this empty parking lot, you know, save for whatever conveyance the Rangers took. And he's just yelling at this living smoke about, a lack of elegance, um, about it's this diatribe about the art of being evil and essentially why he does what he does and the importance that it has in his heart in not necessarily being a henchman. In the Sentai, Finster is more one of the generals. Like they're not completely equal to Rita, but they have powers on their own. And Finster starts talking about conquest and about how wasteful the living smoke is. And there's just this anger in front of him that Brick especially gets this really front seat for because he's right there. And Brick and Cecily and Jane all get to see the living smoke sort of coalesce into this humanoid form that Finster is essentially yelling at. Um, they still have to sort of deal with the bunnies, but this is capturing enough attention that by the time Finster is agreeing to whatever the living smoke has said to him that the Rangers can't hear and walking through, that Brick especially, just because of where he's positioned, has to deal with what I call the Great Finster Dragon. And so basically, something is said by the living smoke that Finster agrees with enough that Finster is going to either take over and take care of it, or Finster is going to transform. And he transforms into this like Finster-headed dragon eel character, and it has bones instead of a real body. And it's very snake-like, very dangerous and sharp, and also not eloquent anymore. It snatches Brick up in its jaws and starts to fly up a little bit to drop Brick from a great height. And so Brick again finds himself up in the air for the first time in how many days? Um, and it's going to turn out fine for Brick, precisely for Jane, but it doesn't turn out fine for Finster. Um, Jane gets the kind of final blow by virtue of wanting to save Brick from being too high up in the air in a way that even coming down as a ranger um, wouldn't kill him because he's a ranger, he's transformed, but would do a lot of damage you'd have to heal from for a long time. Um, and so this kind of disconcerting great Finster dragon is destroyed, and Brick goes and collects Finster's glasses because as Finster is absorbed into the smoke, as Finster kind of degrades and passes away, um, Brick is able to collect his glasses. Um, and what's interesting is that this should have been fun, you know? Having an actual battle against Finster is a thing that most Rangers never even dream about, because why would you dream about something like that? Uh, but I don't want to say Brick is coming apart of the seams a little bit, but Brick is starting to realize, like more so than I think probably the other Rangers, is like internalizing the toll this has really taken. Because um, not that he was trying to save Finster, but it was pretty obvious that Finster on his own wasn't doing evil things. Like he was literally just making marionettes and puppets. And yes, puppets are creepy. Inherently, marionettes are creepy. Anything that doesn't blink, like Teddy Ruxpins, are like kind of the height of evil in some ways, aren't they? Um, but Finster didn't need to become a Finster dragon. Quentin being turned toward the dark side, however that happened, the loss of Merritt and Andrea Lee, just everything that's been happening has been, really hard. And this is something that Jane kind of talks about a little bit at the end of the event, is that she's been hearing every now and then Quentin's music in her head. Um, and didn't quite know what to do with the information. It was so fleeting, it was hard to say. But it's happening more and more. And now this has happened with Finster, happened with Squat. So it's not just the good guys that are being affected. This smoke has affected everyone. Um, and as fall turns to winter, as it gets colder in Angel Grove and people stay more indoors, they're just even more trapped with this fog. trapped with their thoughts, their emotions, trapped with what the team now knows is, if not the ultimate source of evil, it's really bad because of how it's affecting people and what it's causing them to do, and what happens when they agree to this living smoke. What happens when you align yourself with Zedd's vision of the world, and how sad and dark and depressing it all really is. Um, Next episode, episode 11, the local disc golf team championships is what I called it. Um, Jane is unavailable for this episode. Jane has to do some stuff for the Angel Grove Art Institute, where she is going to be attending after high school ends. And so Zordon recommends that they sort of take some time off, they take some time to regroup. Zordon recommends that they do something called, he has to be sort of explain the concept, but he understands that team sports have a lot of value. And so this is kind of my callback for the original Mighty Morphin on TV Rangers, this idea of like sports and team building are really kind of, they help in a lot of ways. And so um, even though the concept has to be explained to him, there is local disc golf championships happening. It's the end of the year, so this is like the last round before they shut down for the season. It takes place at Fielding Park. It will give the chance for the Rangers to stretch their legs. It's not end of the world high stakes that they know of, and so they decide to go. They have to come up with a fun food themed name. They have to have like t-shirts. They'll be battling against like the MST3K team, team of dads called Daticus. Um, they've got the Holy Rollers, which is a group of drag nuns, and so there's also MAD, which is the Angel Grove Magical and Caroling Society. Um, and so this disc golf thing had an opportunity for, they're calling themselves the cheese burglars, by the way. That's the name that they use. And so each of them has a food theme. So the cheese burglars, which is Cecily, Eddy, and Brick, kind of show up to local disc golf. And I explain it a little bit. It has a little bit of the vibe of a field day episode, but less involved. And basically, they're just 10 regulation choruses. A lot of it is going to be doing athletics or a finesse role, depending upon, what is really good for them, because there's some form of athletics that I think work well with this. So you could also do acrobatics. There's a lot of different roles that you could do that will give you physical use of a disc golf, trophy sort of thing, or disc golf frisbee. Um, and it starts out really fun. They don't step in any dog poo. This is the sort of thing where people are coming with silly costumes, so no one's taking it so seriously. There's no way that you can do disc golf so wrong you can die, sort of thing, right? Could be wrong about that. Um, and there's a water feature. There is some sort of time penalty, but this really is about coming together and doing something that isn't life stake shattering at first. Uh, I had them start rolling survival rolls. And then I had them start rolling acrobatics rolls to keep their balance. And it's Eddy who notices it first, and then quickly Cecily. Brick takes a little bit more time just because they're a little further ahead on the course. But the ground starts to get really weird and soft, and the temperature starts to rise to a place where they have to like take off jackets because it's getting colder in Angel Grove, but all of a sudden it gets kind of warm and muggy. And to their horror, Um, Eddy and Cecily and Brick begin to realize that the day off, the day of cheese burglaring, is not really going to be a day off because the earth softens not into mud, but into tar. And they have to get to one of kind of the five really deep dug down, cemented, for the terms of this encounter, safe gazebos. There are five gazebos that are kind of designated for this adventure, um, that are happening in the fielding park right now. and groups, little pockets of people from each team are in the different ones, so they end up in one of the five by themselves, and all these witnesses get to see this earth become tar and get to see the growth of these two fossilized, not Zords. The Zord is the wrong word. If you've ever seen Digimon and you saw Greymon be forced digivolved into Dark War Greymon or whatever it is, where it looks like a fossil version, it's that, but with dinosaur bones. Like not a Zord, not a metallic dinosaur, but an actual dinosaur fossil. And riding atop one is Scorpina, and riding atop another is Goldar. And Scorpina and Goldar start yelling at each other. Scorpina's plot to overtake Zedd and to kind of take over for herself has been found out, and Goldar has been sort of sent to either talk her down or destroy her. Now, most of the conversation is not heard because inside of the bickering, Brick is able to use the Thunderous, which is the scarab cicada sound. So a lot of their arguing back and forth we don't hear. So I didn't have to make up anything for that, but it's fairly obvious that her plot was found out. Um, she doesn't bring along the green putties that she made. They are not here in this episode, but the idea here is that Goldar's dinosaur can shoot fire out of its mouth. So there is a very present risk from these two giant bone fossils fighting. Um, and there's a risk to the civilians. There's even a risk to the Rangers because again, the slickness, the tar like the Rangers can traverse it, but the other people in the other gazebos can't. And so this is a rare instance where there is a battle the Rangers are in, but they actually can't. They can attack, and they do attack a little bit, but it's less about them attacking. It's more about getting everyone else out of the way of Goldar and Scorpina fighting each other. Um, Everything seems to be going well in the battle until Eddy actually uses the white orb to start to freeze the fossils to try to stop the battle by freezing fossils. And unfortunately, he chooses first to freeze because he's just underneath Scorpina's fossil. He chooses to freeze Scorpina's fossil. But unfortunately, freezing the fossil and giving Goldar the extra amount of movement allows Goldar to come over and fly over and plunge his sword straight through Scorpina's heart, body, place. Um, and so, for the second time in however many weeks, Brick has to live with the guilt of someone, um, even if he wasn't incredibly close, that he felt he needed to be protective of. In this case, Merritt Lee's mom, who maybe there was a way she was still in there, maybe there was a way that she could be reasoned with to at least not be an evil space alien ally anymore. And Brick never gets that chance because as Goldar flies off, um, both of the fossil dinos dissolve. They get all the civilians out. But what's left, because Scorpina crumbles into pieces, is Angeli's amber encased scorpion pendant, uh, which Brick also collects. And we don't really get to talk about in the episode, but it's this idea that Eddy too had a front row seat for Scorpino's demise, and essentially by proxy in some ways, I don't want to say caused it, but did sort of cause it by freezing her Zord first. Um, there was no way someone wasn't going to get harmed in this. It was really just a choice that the Rangers didn't know they were making that they sort of had to make, that they forced their hand. Um, And also, Cecily is still sort of dealing with the fact that there is a chance that she actually did kill a putty because they've slowly started to learn about this living smoke. In the first version of the living smoke, created the first version of the putties as well, because it took the people of Eltar and in stripping them of their humanity and replacing all of their goodness with evil, created putties. So there is a good chance that when she ripped the heart out of the putty when it attacked her solo back in season 1, there's a good chance that she actually did do some actual murder to someone. And she's going to have to somehow deal with the fact that that happened and the fact that she was still allowed to be a ranger after that. Um, so the battle does calm down, but there's something kind of very raw about what happens, because now Scorpina is gone, and Goldar sort of flies off. Um, and there's so many of these hanging threads hanging about that's really hard to appreciate. What's going to be coming up soon is the finale of season 2. It's all sort of coming up to a head at some point. We have 2 episodes. They all have a homecoming vibe. Um, they're actually going to be mashing homecoming together with the winter festival because even Principal Kaplan can't ignore how dangerous things have gotten. Uh, but the truth is, it feels like it's coming close to the end because in some ways it is um, the end of the first half of senior year. It might be the end of everything if they can't figure out how to stop people from sacrificing themselves to this living smoke. Um, and who's to say what that end looks like? Because nobody knows. Because the living smoke obscures, the living smoke takes, and the living smoke is everywhere. Things to think about as we head into the finale of this season, as we head into Homecoming and Holding Out for a Hero, which is the last few episodes left, where it's time to face and fight for what you believe in and to save the world as Power Rangers are meant to. We'll see you next time.